वेद गाय जहाँ रचरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनरा बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनरा बंधु लोकनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना प्रभुपाद लोकेरा जीवाना प्रभु कर दया देह मोरे पाद छाया प्रभु कर दया देह मोरे पाद छाया प्रभु पाद पतित पवन पद लैला शरण जादु सुप्रिभुवन जय प्रभु पदा 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 प्रभुपाद कृष्ण प्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द उदिलो वरुणो पूरबभागे विजामनि गौरामणि जागे बकतौ समूह लोया साथे गेलो नागर ब्राजे ताथई बाजे लखोल गन गनाता है जाजरा रोल प्रेमे दला दला सोनेरा अंग चरणे नुपुर बाजे मुकुंद माधव जादव हरि बोलो ने बोलो रे वदन भरी नीचे निंदा बसे गेलो रे रति दिवस शरीर साजे एमन दुर्लभ मानव देह पाइया की कर भावन के हो बिना भजिले जशोदा सुत चरमे पड़ी बेला उदित उत्थापन हईबे आस्था दिना गेलो बोली हईबे व्यस्था तबे कनो एबे आलस होय नभ हृदय रागे जीवन अनित्य जान सार ताहे नाना विधा विपद बाग नाम श्रया करे जतने तुमी ताकह अपन काजे जीवेर कल्याण साधन खां जगते आसिए मधुर नाम अविद्यातिमिरा तपना रूपम हृदय गगने विराजे कृष्ण नाम सुधा करे अपान जुराओ भक्ति विनोद प्राण नाम बिना किछु नहीं तो और 14 भुवन माजे। नाम बिना किछु नहीं तो और 14 भुवन माजे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय जय माता हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite, Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite, Gokul Taruni Mandala Mohite, Gokul Taruni Mandala Mohite, Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite, Damodara Rati Vardhana Vaise, Hari Niskuta Vrindavitine. Damodara Rati Vardhana Vaise, Hari Niskuta Vrindavitine. से राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य विश्वानितादि नवशिलेखे ललिता सखी गुना रमित विशाखे विश्वानुताति नवशिलेखे ललिता सखी गुना रमित विशाखे राधे राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य करुणाम कुरुमये करुणा भरिते सनक सनातन वर्णित चरिते करुणाम कुरुमये करुणा भरिते सनक सनातन वर्णित चरिते राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य राधे जय जय माधव दैत्य जय राधा श्याम सुंदर राधा श्याम सुंदर राधे जय राधा श्याम सुंदर राधा श्याम सुंदर राधे जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम जय गौर निताय जय गौर निताय जय गौर निताय जय गौर निताय प्रभुपाद 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 नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर डिवाइन ग्रेस वैष्णवारविंद भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शिला प्रभुपाद की ISKCON फाउंडर आचार्य शिला प्रभुपाद की जय। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर डिवाइन ग्रेस शिला भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर महाराज की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर प्रेम से गौ श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिर गोवर्धन की श्री वृंदावन धाम की मायापुर नवदीप धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की द्वारका धाम की गंगामयी की जमुनामयी की भक्ति देवी की तुलसी महारानी की श्याम भक्तवृंद की श्री श्री गौणिताय की श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम जी की श्री श्री राधा श्याम सुंदर जी की नरसिंहदेव भगवान की प्रहलाद महाराज की शिला प्रभुपाद की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. So here is a reading from a lecture spoken by Srila Prabhupada in 1968. Radharani is the pleasure potency of Krishna. Krishna is the supreme Brahman. Just try to understand. Krishna is the supreme Brahman. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan. So when Param Brahma wants to enjoy, that enjoying spirit is there in the Param Brahma. Otherwise, we cannot have this enjoying spirit. Because we are part and parcel, therefore we have got that enjoying spirit, but that is materially contaminated. But the fact is there, because Krishna, he is enjoying this enjoying spirit we have also got, but I do not know how to enjoy. So we are trying to enjoy in the matter, in the dull matter. That is spiritual. So Brahman, Sukhanubhutya. People are trying to feel what is Brahma, Sukha, pleasure of Brahma Bhuva. That is not material pleasure. So many yogis, they have given up their family life, their kingdom, and meditating to achieve the Brahman pleasure. Actually, the idea is Brahman pleasure. So many brahmacharis, so many sannyasis, they are trying to achieve the Brahman pleasure, and in order to achieve the Brahman pleasure, they are neglecting, they are kicking off all this material pleasure. Do you think that Brahman pleasure is ordinary, this material pleasure? To achieve a portion of Brahman pleasure, if they are kicking off this material pleasure, don't talk of ourselves. We are ordinary men. In the history, we have got instances, that of Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj, under whose name this planet is called Bharatvarsha. That Bharat Maharaj was the emperor of the whole world. And as emperor, he had his beautiful wife and young children. But at the age of 24 years, just young man, he gave up everything. This is a very old story, of course, but you know Lord Buddha. He was also a prince. He was also a prince and not an ordinary man, and he was a Kshatriya, and he was always enjoying with beautiful women. That is the palace pleasure accustomed in Oriental countries, and that in the palace there are many beautiful girls, so they're always dancing and giving pleasure to the king and the princes. Oh, look who's giving class today. So Lord Buddha was also in such a pleasure, but he gave up everything and began to meditate. So this is from a longer lecture that Prabhupada gave. It's you can find it on the internet on Srimati Radharani's appearance day, trying to explain to the devotees in 1968 the difference between Krishna's pleasure, enjoying with Radharani, and the devotees' pleasure in the material world. So we have the boat festival this evening at 6:30. We have Artik, and just following the Artik, we take Chota Radhe Shyam outside on their palanquin, put them into their swan boat, and then everyone will have an opportunity to pull the boat around the fountain. And tomorrow, of course, is Radharani's appearance day, Shri Radhastami Mahotsava, so we hope everyone will be attending. We have a full-day festival. Even if you're going to work tomorrow, you can come part of the morning, go off to work, and come back and continue your festival in the evening. We have cut up this morning in the kitchen if anyone would like to help prepare for the feast. We start the cut up today because it's an early feast. It's served at 1 p.m., so it takes a concentrated period of time to get everything cooked in the morning tomorrow. There's other opportunities for service today also. If you'd like to help, please let Keshava know or myself. And Jayananda Prabhu tomorrow is his last day here, so he's giving the class this morning. We've been happy to have him here observing our deity worship, and we hope our grade is good, but we know we can improve, so that's why we've asked him to come here, how we can improve our standard even higher. And these were the devotees who assisted their spiritual master addressing the deities today. Shishi Radha Sham Sundar Nitai Prabhu, Chota Radha Sham Sundar Karneshwari Prabhu, Shishi Krishna Balaram, Nanda Prabhu, Chota Krishna Balaram, Sharala Prabhu, Shishi Gornitai Manjari Sundari Prabhu, Chota Gornitai Gandharvika Prabhu, Gurs and Lord Nishingadev, Madhuri Gopi Prabhu. Hari Bol.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Thera Vanachari Jamuna Thera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Thera Vanachari Jamuna Thera Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So this morning we're going to be covering the 10th canto, chapter 48, verses 12 through 18. And there we have it. Akrura bhavantam Krishna Sahara modava Prabhu Kinchik chikirsayan pragad Akrura priya kamyaya Akrura bhavantam Krishna Sahara modava Prabhu Kinchit chikirsayan pragad Akrura priya kamyaya. Devotees? Akrura bhavanam Krishna. Akrura bhavanam Krishna. Ladies? Okay, translation and purports by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Then Lord Krishna, wanting to have some things done, went to Akrura's house with Balaram and Uddhava. The Lord also desired to please Akrura. Purport. The previous incident of Lord Krishna's visit to Trivikra's house, and now his visit to Akrura's, gives a fascinating glimpse into the daily activities of Sri Krishna and Mathura city. So where we're at right now is the last class was just finishing up the past time where Krishna visited Kubja, otherwise known as Trivikras. So they were just there, and now they're segueing to Akrura's house. And I'll go ahead and just recite the translations for the remaining verses up till 18. Akrura stood up in great joy when he saw them, his own relatives and the greatest of exalted personalities, coming from a distance. After embracing them and greeting them, Akrura bowed down to Krishna and Balaram and was greeted by them in return. Then, when his guests had taken their seats, he worshipped them in accordance with scriptural rules. Purport. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that Lord Sri Krishna and the others approached Akrura in a friendly attitude. At first, Akrura reciprocated that friendly mood, and then, in the course of showing them hospitality, he adopted his natural devotional attitude towards the Lord and thus offered his obeisances to Sri Krishna and Sri Balaram. Text 15 and 16. O king, Akrura bathed the feet of Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, and then poured the bathwater on his head. He presented them with gifts of fine clothing, aromatic sandalwood paste, flower garlands, and excellent jewelry. And thus, worshipping the two lords, he bowed his head to the floor, and then began to massage Lord Krishna's feet, placing them on his lap. And with his head bowed in humility, he addressed Krishna and Balaram as follows. Text 17. Akrura said, "It is our good fortune that you two lords have killed the evil Kamsa and his followers, thus delivering your dynasty from endless suffering and causing it to flourish." Text 18. You both are the original supreme person, the cause of the universe and its very substance. Not the slightest subtle cause or manifest product of creation exists apart from you. Purport. After praising Krishna and Balaram for having saved their dynasty, Akrura now points out that the Lord actually has no mundane connection with any social or political institution. He is the original personality of Godhead, performing his pastimes for the benefit of the entire universe. Om Gyantamarandasya Gyanandjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Swami Nami Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shri Bhakti Shri Karuna Shakti Bhakti Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Swami Nami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravanti Jani Virvisheshashmi Vivaditas Chari Siddharthi. So, I don't know, I guess by some fortuitous event, I was given a section that involves worship, so I'm going to go with that. That works for me. So what we see here, part of the main theme, as Krishna and Balaram come to Akrura's house, is Akrura receives him, reception, and he accepts worship from Akrura. They both do. So it's wonderful how in our Vedic Sanatana Dharma tradition, how we have such a rich, I guess, expression of respect, appreciation. Our worship tradition is wonderful. When we look at Judeo-Christian traditions and all that, yeah, there's elements of worship in every culture, but we just see to the extent and how intricate and how deep it can go. And so it's particularly mentioned here that Akrura offers some items. What did he offer? He presented him with gifts of fine clothing, so that's known as vastra, aromatic sandalwood paste, ganda, flower garlands, pushpa malu, excellent jewelry, abharanani. So these are all things that we offer in the course of performing not only deity worship, of course, but to any respectable guest or respectable person. And one key point when it comes to deity worship, of course, it's personal. At least for us, in our line, it's personal. So it's not just the items of the worship or the procedures that we follow or something that's related to the Lord in his deity form. No, it's the tradition for offering respect and worship to any respected guests. So whether it may be our teachers, respected elders, what have you. And so when it comes to these items and the orders and all these kind of things, many of you are familiar that these items are found in Hare Bhakti Vilas. Hare Bhakti Vilas was compiled by Srila Sanatana Goswami, and later Gopal Bhatta Goswami did some final preparation, and ultimately it went out. So for those of us that have a deity worship background, we've probably heard that there's these 64 items of worship. And so these items that Akrura offered are all part within that. And we find that all these items are listed in the 11th Vilas, or 11th chapter of Hare Bhakti Vilas. How many of you have ever looked through Hare Bhakti Vilas before? It's pretty intense. It's a pretty intense thing. What's that? Scary. Yeah, that's a good word for it. And Hare Bhakti Vilas it's somewhat vexing because on one hand, Srila Prabhupada emphasized, yes, we follow, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta as well, yes, we follow Hare Bhakti Vilasa and all that. But then it's also understood that, there's not one of us in this room or in our tradition that seems to be able to like follow everything. And we heard that saying sometimes from Srila Prabhupada, if you knew all the rules and this and that, you would faint, right? We've heard that before. So it's like that. In addition, Srila Prabhupada mentions about Hare Bhakti Vilas a couple times in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Madhya 135 and Antya 4-221, where he says something to the extent, it is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's opinion, however, that to follow the Hare Bhakti Vilas strictly is to actually follow the Vaishnava rituals in perfect order. He claims that the Smarta Samaj, which is strictly followed by the caste Brahmanas, has influenced portions that Gopal Bhatta Goswami collected from the original Hare Bhakti Vilas. It's therefore very difficult to find out Vaishnava directions from the book of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. It's better to consult the commentary made by Sanatana Goswami himself for Hare Bhakti Vilas under the name of Digdarshani Tika. So anyway, there's some question about, okay, what aspects of this book do we actually follow? What's important? What's, maybe not so principal to our practice? But anyway, one thing that was clear was that, Srila Prabhupada was requesting and asking that, we compile a book on deity worship early on that was based on Hare Bhakti Vilas. And we find, when it comes to many of those respects, actually in, let's see here, in 11th Vilas, verse 127 through 140, we have these 64 items of worship. That's where we actually find it. And we'll also find in Madhya Lila 24:334 that where Sanatana Goswami is with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Varanasi, and he's there for, 10 weeks, I believe? 10 weeks in Varanasi getting instructed by Mahaprabhu. And so you'll find around verses, it's the Atmaram, explanations of Atmaram verse chapter. At one point, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly requests Sanatana Goswami to write, compile Hare Bhakti Vilas. And the very first, you could say, deity worship manual for ISKCON was essentially just taking the verses around 334. I think it started with maybe 24, 330, and then it went on some. And it was called The Perfection of Deity Worship. I think it came out in 74. Does anyone have a copy of that? Maybe not. But essentially it took Chaitanya Charitamrita verses and purports and that's there. And what we find in the purport of 334 is Srila Prabhupada explaining the 64 items of worship, the 16 items of worship that are within that 64. So I thought, given that these shlokas are all about Akrura receiving and offering articles of worship, that would obviously be the theme of this discussion. So it's interesting. Before we had Pancharatra Pradeep, that otherwise, aka the Orange Book in ISKCON in 95, that came out in 95, Krishna Kshetra Prabhu ultimately put out. There was that Archana Padati that was published in 1978 before that. And even before this Archana Padati put out by Jayatirtha, there was this Perfection of Deity Worship that I was explaining as these Chaitanya Charitamrita verses. So those of you that have a interest in a background in deity worship, at some point, if you haven't seen it already, go to Madhya 24:334, and you'll see where Srila Prabhupada lists in order, it's quite a long purport, lists in order all these 64 items, as well as 16 items. And another thing that's really interesting and vexing, the more you study deity worship and you get into it, you find that there's oftentimes a lot of gray area. It's not that everything's exactly the same. For instance, the order of items, you'll see some variation. The variation of items will have, let's see, Argya before Padya. You'll see in Madhya 24:334. Argya is before Padya, but then in another part, in another Vilas, in the same book, it has it reversed. So we have to understand and delineate between what's principles and what's details when it comes to worship. And it's really interesting because we find it in our own ISKCON and our practical, experience worshiping the deities, and many of you have had this personal experience as well, is that sometimes we can get hung up on the details, right? We can get very hung up on the details, and it can cause all sorts of interesting interactions. And it sounds like you know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, it can get very interesting. And one verse that I always like to bring out that I find quite important, that's where Srila Prabhupada offers a purport in Bhagavatam 4.8.54. I think I might have it here. And essentially this 4.8.54 purport explains that deity worship goes on according to time, place, attendant conveniences. And let's see here, the translation just for the sake of expediency. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is the 12-syllable mantra for worshiping Lord Krishna. One should install the physical forms of the Lord, and with the chanting of the mantra, should offer flowers and fruits and other varieties of foodstuffs exactly according to the rules and regulations prescribed by authorities. But this should be done in consideration of place, time, and attendant conveniences and inconveniences. So basically, Kala Desha Patra type idea. And so we see how Srila Prabhupada ingeniously made so many adjustments when it came to establishing deity worship around the world. In the earlier days, we didn't even have these, what you would call, really, really elaborate installations, prana pratistas. Many of you were probably there. Sometimes it came down to, doing a simple abhishek with milk, and you get the soup ladle out of the kitchen, right? There wasn't any fancy paraphernalia to pour and things like that. And so the point is that it's okay to have unity and diversity in our worship. Not all temples in ISKCON have to have the exact same details going on in their worship. Not the exact same schedule, not the exact same level of, how elaborate or not elaborate the worship is. It all depends. It's interesting, some devotees say, no, it should be the same. So if it's the same, does that mean that, in Alachua, all of a sudden you need to start doing 14 subjis for Raj Bhoga like they do in Mayapur? Probably not. That would probably be difficult to maintain. Or maybe not. But the point is that the principles have to be there, but then the details get adjusted according to the time, place, circumstance, the facility, the number of devotees, the financial considerations, and all that. So, we have all these items of worship that we're talking about. But does Krishna really, really care about these items of worship? Yes or no? Ultimately. Exactly. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhaktya prayachati. Bhaktya, with devotion. So these items are the vehicle. If we don't have that bhakti, or we're not trying to aspire to that bhakti, we don't have that understanding that that's ultimately what Krishna wants from us, and not the flower or the fruit or the water, then we're missing the whole idea. We're missing the whole idea. Actually, I've got this, I always mention when I talk that one of the best deity worship lectures that Srila Prabhupada offers is the Rukmini Dwarkanath installation. Were any of you around for Rukmini Dwarkanath installation? So he gives a wonderful, lecture, of which I took 3 or 4 snippets. I think I'll just play one today. But to this point that we're talking about, Srila Prabhupada gives a very, very compelling purport to it.
Real thing is bhakti. What you can offer to Krishna, everything belongs to Krishna. What you have got, what is your value? And what is the value of your things? It is nothing. Therefore, the real thing is bhaktya. Real thing is your feeling. Krishna, kindly take it. I have no qualification. I am most rotten fallen. But I have brought this thing for you, please take. This will be accepted. Don't be puffed up. Always be careful. You are dealing with Krishna. That is my request.
Nice, huh? That's the mood to aspire for. I'm sorry? The essence. The essence is Srila Prabhupada saying, what have you got? All your things, the things you got are whatever, useless. He says rotten, I think, everything rotten. He says, what have you got? And don't be puffed up, but the point is the bhakti, the feeling. He's emphasizing it's the feeling that counts. It's not just it's not the externals, it's the feeling behind the worship. And that at the end he says, don't be puffed up. So, we can think that we're big pujaris and we're operating on Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti according to rules and regulations. So while we might not have that feeling, or it might be in the very dormant state or minimal at this point, the idea is that by following the rules and the regulations that we'll get there. Srila Prabhupada was also very emphatic, and there's a popular purport in Bhagavatam where, he's talking about that our worship of Radha Krishna, it's like Lakshmi Narayan. I think most of you have probably heard something to that effect. And that he was cautioning us not to become sahaja and taking things cheaply and just, kind of like Raga Margena when it comes to our worship principles. There's a place for that, but it's not in our temples, at least on an external level, no matter where we are as devotees in our Krishna consciousness. For the sake of preaching and the devotees around us, we're always worshiping, in the mood of awe and reverence, and we're operating, at least externally, on a Vaidhi level, Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So, anyone can memorize a bunch of shlokas. We could get someone who just has a really nice, sharp mind that could memorize the whole Bhagavad Gita. Similarly, we could probably find someone who just has some mundane skill, and we could probably teach them the externals of deity worship, and it could be beautiful. It could be really elaborate and nice. But do they have that mood? Do they have the devotion? So it's the same idea. We want to be trying to do things in such a way, and have a proper meditation that in order to facilitate developing that mood. And so we also understand that, while Srila Prabhupada did ask devotees to go and see how worship is done at Radharaman and other places, and they encouraged to learn, he told Jayatirtha and Giriraj Maharaj intimated to us something to the effect that, Srila Prabhupada had told that, I didn't live in a temple and I wasn't so involved with like temple worship and all that. So when it comes to a lot of the details and all that, go here, go there, that kind of thing. And check it out and learn. So Srila Prabhupada was emphasizing the principles, and he was always, of course, emphasizing the cleanliness and the punctuality to be regulated in what we do. And so it's interesting somehow where devotees will be focusing on a lot of elaborate stuff, but the cleanliness aspect isn't even there. So we need to focus on these fundamentals and then go from there. So there was these mentioned items of worship that was mentioned by Akrura, and all of them are, I believe, part of the 16 items of worship. These 16 items of worship, there are some variations among some pradayas and this and that, but generally you'll find that it's quite similar. And for those of you that have studied or performed deity worship and got into it to some extent, you know what they are. The general order that we use, and you'll find in, starting from Archana Paddhati when it came out, is first item is asan, giving a seat. Asan can mean seat, it can also mean situation of worship. There's different situations of worship. I'll get into that in a moment. Well, I might as well get into it now. So there's 7 asanas. There may very well be more, but there's 7 asanas or situations of worship that have been shared with me that I've learned. And this is really important in understanding the whole worship process, because it's a whole internal meditation as well. You're taking the Lord into different situations throughout the worship through these 16 items. And sometimes if we don't have complete understanding, some aspects of our worship might not be quite in line. So there's the mantra-san, and this is where the Lord is received. So we see that Akrura was, generally offering reception. Reception includes offering a seat, then offering a foot wash, padya. Arghya is part of that as well. And then achman, water for sipping, madhuparka, refreshing beverage like that. So this is all part of the reception. And this happens under the mantra-san. And one thing that I see in many temples is that pujaris will often start the worship and offer these items when the Lord is undressed. But it's not like that. The situation is, if I invite you to my home, I'll receive you first. I'll offer you a seat in the sitting room or, like that. So as you first arrive, I'll offer you a seat, ask you to be comfortable, swagatam suswagatam. Then I'll give you a foot bath. You're clothed. You're not in the bathroom. You're not undressed. I'll offer you a foot bath. I'll offer some arghya. I'll explain what that is later. I'll offer you, some achman, madhuparka. So this is all going on then. It's only after these reception items go on that then you would ask to go to the snanasan, or where the bathing happens, go to the bathroom, so to speak. So what we find sometimes in temples or in home worship, where devotees will offer all these items after undressing, but that technically isn't correct. You wouldn't be offering these things. I wouldn't be offering you something to drink in madhuparka when you're in your gamsha. That comes later. So first, these items go on there. So we have, as I mentioned, asans, swagatam, suswagatam, padya, foot wash, arghya. Arghya is like what we're offering when we perform arti, that water in the conch. And there's a few different recipes for arghya. One recipe, it includes lotus petals, tulsi leaves, darba grass, some grains, shamdanya, like that, durva grass. And there's oftentimes a misconception of, those were the ingredients for padya. For arghya, it's oftentimes different grains, rice, barley, flours, sometimes sandalwood paste. There's no set thing like this is a right recipe, that's wrong. I have about 5 different recipes for what's termed arghya, depending upon where you find it in different sastra. Anyway, there's a very common misconception that goes on, and without fail, whenever I talk about it, there's always someone in the room that was like, "Oh, I thought it was this and that." I even happened upon a very senior devotee who is an authority in many ways in deity worship, who had this misunderstanding for the last 40 years. So when we're offering arti and we have this water in a conch, what are we doing? No. Washing feet is padya. Washing the feet is padya, and that's not part of an arti. Arti is a reception. We're receiving an elevated guest. Yes, exactly. So arghya is auspicious ingredients that are in the water. I gave you the ingredients for reception. They're not drunk. The idea is, to a very respectable person, you would present it or pour it to their hands, and then they would put it on their head, or you put it on their head directly. Just like when we honor the prasadam, when the arghya comes out, on the prasadam, we're putting it on our head as mahaprasad. Many people, and some of you, maybe some willing to admit, maybe not, thought you're bathing the Lord. That's a common conception, that hey, I'm bathing. But no, this is a reception. They have their clothes on. They're in public. You're not doing. It's not an abhishek during an arti. And then similarly, with this misconception of they're meditating on either bathing the feet or bathing head down or whatever, then the next thing is that cloth, right? Idam vastram. So when they have the conception that, okay, I was bathing the Lord, then they have the conception, okay, now I'm drying the Lord off. But no, this vastra, in this case, in the situation of an arti, and what Akrura offers, it's a gift of cloth. Like you'd offer a chadar to a respected guest, or a dhoti, or something like that. So it's a gift of cloth. Like kusha grass and some durva grass and all that, and some seeds. How palatable would that be to you, to the taste? You'd cut your tongue on the grass even. It wouldn't taste good at all. It wouldn't taste good at all. So it's not for that purpose. Okay, so we've been talking up to reception. Then we have, I believe it's the 8th, that we have snan. So that's the bathing. So once we offer all these reception ingredients, ending with giving madhu parka, which is madhu, honey. It's a mixture of like honey, ghee, little yogurt like that. You just take a little bit. I was told by Janani Prabhu the way, they just dip a finger and you flick a little in your mouth. And then your palate, it's sweet. You got all this honey sticky stuff. So then we offer achman again, idam punar achmaniam. So we offer water for sipping again to clear the palate. And then that's the end of the reception section of this 16-item worship. Then we go into, we'd offer to take our respected guest, whoever we're worshiping, to the bathing area. It's at that point that we would undress the deities, and then we'd put them on the snan vedi. Okay, so then we have the bathing, snan, very familiar with. And actually, bathing and ornamenting, Krishna says himself in 11:27:16. So the 27th chapter in the Uddhava Gita, in the 11th canto, this is Krishna directly giving instructions about deity worship to Uddhava. And so he tells there that bathing and ornamenting is his favorite offerings. It's not an arti, it's not bhoga offerings, it's bathing and dressing. So these are what we should focus on. And so we bathe, we dress, we offer ornaments, and then we offer scents, gandha. We'll offer some sandalwood or some other things. And then pushpa, these are flowers. We can offer a flower garland at that point. Tulsi, offer tulsi at that point on the pushpa. Then dupa, then the incense, then dipa, the ghee lamp, and then naivedya. There's a bhoga offering that's included. The 15th item is offering a bhoga offering. So like what we'll see here in many temples will be generally the naivedya offering is just some fruits, cut fruits, and maybe a sweet, maybe not, like that. And then finally, pranam. We're offering different stuti and stotra, glorifying the Lord. And that's what we'll find when the next class, whomever gives the following section after this, tomorrow or the next day, probably the next day, it's emphasizing Akrura offering glorification, prayers of glorification to the Lord. All right, so I think we're good on time. Any questions? Whomever, from the front to the back, I guess. Yes. Janmastami Prabhu, you want to ask first? Or whomever?
I have a couple questions. One's a comment, actually. I was cultivating a donor at one time in Mayapur, and he was like super infatuated with following all of the details of observing Ekadasi coming from Hare Bhakti Vilas. And it was like 3-day jugya, like really intense. And he kind of, it was a little bit too much for him to do. So I consulted with Krishna Kshetra, because he actually, his PhD thesis, to a large extent, was on the Hare Bhakti Vilas. And he made a point to me, and I'm pretty sure this is where I got it. that Sanatana Goswami compiled the Hare Bhakti Vilas because there was such a strong Smarta Brahmana influence in Vrindavan. And if he felt that if he didn't do something along these lines, then their efforts to promote bhakti would be minimized.
Yeah.
So that's just a comment. I don't know if you had you brought something.
I was touching on that. From what little I understand, I don't claim to have a full, complete understanding. It's a little vexing to me, but it's a similar idea to Srila Jiva Goswami and doing the sandarbhas to establish the tradition as well. Like maybe there's some sort of correlation
in the midst of all of this gyan.
Exactly.
The question I have, when I joined the movement, there was the kind of training and influence I got from senior devotees was that the Bhagavat Marg was more significant than the Pancharatriki Marg.
Yes.
Just be a preacher, don't worry about deity worship. So I actually never did much, and it seems that now with the Mayapur Academy, that there's a kind of a push, swinging the pendulum appropriately the other way, and I wonder if you have any insight in that and how that should be promulgated, the parallel tracks.
Sure. Yeah, I always mention this in a deity worship 101 type course. So we have the Bhagavat Marg, Pancharatrika Marg. No doubt the Yuga Dharma is Harinam Sankirtan in this day and age. Deity worship took the higher role in the previous Yuga. And so the way we position deity worship is we say that chanting the holy name is primary, no doubt. Deity worship is a integral and very important and integral auxiliary sadhana in order to help purify our senses and thus actually help us better to chant the holy name like that. So that's how we position deity worship. And as we know, the Panchanga Bhakti, the primary 5 out of the 64 different items of devotional service, we have deity worship is one of them, and we see how Srila Prabhupada placed so much emphasis. So if he didn't think it was important, then he wouldn't have gone to so much trouble to establish deities all over the world. We have this analogy that we always talk about, and you alluded to. It's like a train track where you have 2 rails. One rail is the Bhagavat, which is hearing, chanting, like that, and then we have studying Shastra, and then we have the Pancharatrika side, which is the deity worship. And so it's explained that both of these things are wonderful and necessary, and by performing both of these things and going in a parallel line, we stay on the track and we get to our destination more quickly. If one of those is off or missing, what have you, it's very difficult to get to your destination. Is that okay?
Can you tell us a little bit about how Sanatana Goswami, where did the information come for him to write down this in the Hare Bhakti Vilas? I mean, you alluded to a previous Hare Bhakti Vilas.
Right.
Is there some original Hare Bhakti Vilas?
From my understanding, and if you look at the Hare Bhakti Vilas, it's sort of like the majority of it is collected shlokas from different places, different Puranas. So it's not necessarily that he's just, it'll say from so-and-so Purana, from this Purana, from that Purana, and it'll say this and that. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see in different areas of this work that some details will be different and there'll be seeming contradictions and all that, but he's basically assimilating and just patching together shlokas that are from different sastra.
We took 108 things from Sri Sampradaya, and Anubhashya Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur elaborated that Gopal Bhatta Goswami brought
provided a samskaras description of how to perform our samskaras in Satkriya Sardipika. So if you were to go to the Gurukul in Mayapur, they have it. And this is ideally what we want to follow for our line, for our Sampradaya, for our Gaudiya Vaishnavas. because before he gets into any of the ritual and any of the details, like the first section of the book, and as it's translated in English, it's probably a good 20-30 pages. He's got all these different pramans, all these different evidences saying that there shouldn't be any Devata worship whatsoever. There's no Ganesh puja, no Navagraha puja. It's just straight up worshiping Vishnu or Krishna in Vaishnavas. So instead of like Navagraha, they're worshiping Navayogendras, and instead of, all this. So I guess it's a flavor or a way that he did some adjustments so that it moves more away from the Karmakandi Devata type worship that you traditionally see and more in line with the Vaishnavas. Yes, Prabhu.
In our Abhishek, using this honey and ghee and
yes,
all the juice,
mm-hmm.
I mean, is the sticky substance?
Yes.
And when they were crowning the kings, I mean, they were actually putting on their head these things?
When it comes to bathing, apparently, if you can find shlokas, I was just reading one recently in Hare Bhakti Vilas where it talks about having a Panchamrit bath. But in any event, aside from that, when it comes particularly to like our worship of Krishna, Rupa Goswami came out with a work called Sri Krishna Janma Titi Vidhi. And this is another small book you can get from the Gurukul in Mayapur. It's like that. And so it's basically how to observe Krishna's appearance day, how to observe Krishna Janmashtami. And the bulk of it is the Abhishek process. And this is primarily what we use. We base our Abhishek procedure here in ISKCON is based off that. Sri Krishna Janma Titi Vidhi. The rules to observe Krishna's birthday.
But can you, what is the significance of using this, each substance, honey and ghee
substance,
and
right.
all juices and...
Right.
Prabhupada did give in nectar of devotion. Srila Prabhupada says that when Mother Yashoda sees Krishna, her breast milk comes out so much that he is soaked. And then Prabhupada used the word Abhishek. And he says that's how at the Abhishek we must use milk minimum because that's why Krishna is being bathed every day. And then if you look at the Rupa Goswami Pad's sloka on that, I was researching a little bit, and then he says that all these elements, Madhuparaka, all these elements, whatever you say, these are all expansion and manifestation or became visible of their feelings towards the Lord. Just like a pranaya avaloke, the Benugit says that when the gopis look at Krishna, their eyes is the flame, and their love comes as the tears, is the ghee. The ghee originally transformed from that. Like when Krishna comes to back from the coward field to the house in the evening, how Mother Yashoda welcomed him. These are all the 5 elements. First being the dhuna, what do you call, incense, to remove all the bugs. So we use that incense, that's why beginning. And she does this every day, Arati. But she is not thinking of Arati, but she is thinking of the welfare, well-being to Krishna. And then bring the lamp to see every part of Krishna's body. If there is a bruises or something, they bring some water, has a napkin to wipe it. It's like a whole Arati also in Ragomarg there. Only reason I'm saying because I had a very intimate talk with Sripad Radhanath Maharaj for a long time. And then he says that when he was a pujari in New Vrindavan, and Prabhupada had a very dynamic, you can see he's coming from Brajadham, because he said, worshipping Shalogram, you can bathe and you put on a dress. And then he says, if you want extra, put a tulasi and others. And then he says, put a flute. Now where, beside the Goriyo, where is Shalogram ever offer flute? I never heard such thing. But this is Prabhupada. This is Braju mood.
Yes. There's this whole nice pastime that Jananivas Prabhu shares where he asks Prabhupada directly, so it's Shalagram Krishna. And if I'm a little fuzzy on the story. I actually recorded it on video. I'm a little fuzzy on it. But Jananivas Prabhu was feeling bad, okay, I asked maybe a stupid question to the spiritual master. He was in anxiety, and then sometime later, Srila Prabhupada said yes. Shaligram. Yeah, not only that, the Shaligram transformed. Yeah.
Not like he invented that.
Yeah. Next. Yes.
Krishna Prabhu, you cited the devotee who for 40 years was under the impression that when the water is offered during the artik, you're washing the feet.
Bathing, I think, is what, some sort of bathing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the cloth is to dry.
Yes.
Well, he's not the only one, but
Yes.
so I also then wonder, thank you for that clarification.
Uh-huh.
When I had in the past, was one of my services to prepare that tray for the artik, I wouldn't, I would just take tap water for that container.
Yes.
Not like you say with different elements in it.
Good point. I should have made this point. Actually, I had it in my mind earlier, but I forgot. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, traditionally, as we all know, when we're preparing a RT tray, we're generally just using plain water. Sometimes the devotees would maybe add some rose essence or maybe a little sandalwood or put some flowers in there. So yeah, that's fine. The understanding is it's representative of such. You could, if we wanted to be more, opulent and all that, we could have those things. That being said, that same argya is offered during morning worship, and traditionally we do have those ingredients in there. We'll have 4 little katoris, and we'll have the foot bath in one with a spoon, and then we'll have the this argya that we'll offer as well, and we'll actually assemble the ingredients. We'll be putting some grains or some flowers and things like that in there. Especially for Janardhan worship, there's a shalagram on Radha Madhava's altar, and so it's through Janardhan that the elaborate worship is offered, Panchamrita Snan and all this. Similarly here, like I saw Prabhu performing the worship in the morning. They have these 4 containers. Yeah, Ramanya Prabhu and all the others as well. I think for all the deities, you're offering these 4 articles. Yeah. Alternatively, temples or in your worship, whether it be at temples or at home, instead of actually preparing these ingredients, you can offer water for substitution, samanya argya. So basically you'd have like an extra achman cup or your achman cup. And, it's stated that either, rice or flower petals or water you're able to use in meditation in substitution of the actual items. So, if you want to offer these items, but the facilities there, it's difficult, or the time, for some reason, you can offer these items by substitution. You can just take water from the Panchapatra. Yes.
If you don't mind, can you say 1 or 2 things about shalagram worship?
1 or 2 things about shalagram worship. Be a little more specific. Okay, one thing I can say is Srila Prabhupada clearly, and you can find it written in Vedas, he wanted shalagram to be in temples where the worship could be done. He wanted shalagram worship established. We see in a few temples there's shalagrams, but interestingly enough, we see more Govardhan Shilas in our temples. And Govardhan Shilas, from what we're able to see in all our research, Srila Prabhupada never authorized on the temple. In homes, yes. You'll even find in Krishna book where Srila Prabhupada says the devotees of the Krishna consciousness movement may take, a rock from Govardhan, something along those lines, and worship. But in terms of Govardhan Shila worship and having on the altar, to our knowledge, he never approved. Not only that, a Govardhan Shila ended up some of the managers at Mayapur, not the Pujari department, but managers at the time, temple president, what have you. I'm not sure exactly who was behind it, but this was shared to me by Jananivas Prabhu, that Govardhan Shila was on the altar. Srila Prabhupada saw it and said, take it back to Govardhan. So Govardhan Shila left Mayapur for a while. And then later, other managers, once again, not part of the Pujari department, but other managers, temple managers, what have you, they brought Govardhan back again. So Govardhan's here in worship, but interestingly, it was never approved by Srila Prabhupada to our knowledge. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all the nice nectar. But there's a case referring to Governor Sheila in France, the farm, the castle. The Prabhupada found the Governor Sheila in his desk.
Okay.
What is this? Who put this in here? Prabhupada asking the devotees. So, well, Prabhupada, we just want to keep it in your desk. No, this is Governor. Put him on the altar. Because they just installed Krishna Balaram there.
Thank you. Let me get those details.
Yeah, I was there, and I see the deities, and they told me the temple president, the devotees in France.
Okay.
That happened. The Prabhupada said, no, this is Governor Sheila. You need to worship it on the altar.
Okay.
Maybe it's the only case. I don't know.
Good to know. I'd like to add that. See, I'm always learning new things, and it's by the blessings of all the senior devotees that you're able to share more and more.
Just want to make a small comment. When Prabhupada authorized the Archana Party through Kirtan and the BBT, he wanted to standardize ISKCON deity worship. Yes. Not exactly like you say, every temple is the same. It's impossible. But to have a standard. He was very concerned.
Yes.
As you mentioned, in the early days, Prabhupada established and installing deities because he's such a great Paramahansa, high level, just by bathing the deity with milk, chanting Mahamantra, he already installed the deity Prabhupada.
Just his prayers,
he's Paramahansa, he's our founder Acharya. But he wanted us to follow rules and regulations.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a unique challenge that we have in ISKCON. It's an international organization. And so, like I mentioned, there's, also giving Shastra proof that, there's all this room for variation in our worship. It's not like, Prabhupada says in the purport, it's not stereotyped. So, but because we're an international organization, it's not just that we have like one temple with like a small Gurukul type setup and that's that. Because it's an international organization, there's so many temples, so many devotees, that for the sake of minimizing any unnecessary confusion, we need to first make sure that we get out and train on all the principles. But even a lot of the practical worship, we want to standardize as well, because otherwise there's confusion. So I try to do my best to explain that, it's not like this is the way and the truth and the light in terms of it has to be exactly like this. But for the sake of us all being on the same page, this is how we're presenting it. Like we remember in the white, and it probably tripped a lot of devotees up, including some of you. In the Archana Paddhati, it was saying how to offer the circles. The incense was 4 to the feet, 2 to the chest, 7 around the body. And then less than 20 years later, when Pancharatra Pradeep came out, it just said 7 around the body. Oh, what's going on? Am I doing an offense? Which is right? Which is wrong? Well, you know what? In one sense, it's a detail, because we've been asking our senior devotees. We have many senior devotees, and that's one of the questions we have for them. Should we go back to what it was before, or the later, or offer both? Or just we're definitely going to explain that it's somewhat of a detail. That being said, when it comes to an individual temple and how we do things as well, we also need to be a little careful, because once again, for the sake of training and also for a particular set of deities, if they want to, you want to have some level of consistency in your worship. It's not that we can be all doing our own thing. And the mood to have when new devotees come, the mood to have is, no, this is the way I learned it there, and I'm gonna do something like this or that. No, we want to adopt to what Radhesham is used to doing. Just like we understand a 5-star hotel or restaurant, what makes it that way? One of the aspects is consistency of service. No matter who your waiter is, or whatever, that sabji is going to be like it was when you ordered it before, like that. There'll be some consistency in how you're treated and dealt with. So, it's important that us as pujaris, and we have this mood that, okay, I'm here, and their lordships at this location are used to being served in such a way, and so we should have that kind of mood to it. Yes, Puja.
I have something to add to your thing there. I was a head pujari in Hyderabad, 1976, and in 1977, when Prabhupada was really sick, I wrote him a letter. I had changed all the outfits to make the finest outfits you can imagine. And one man was going to donate to me maybe 25 or 30 kilos of pure copper. And what I was going to do is I was going to design feet and hands and gold plate them and put them on Jagannath. So I asked your Prabhupada if I could do that. And Prabhupada's response was that I could. So that's something you can add to your...
Said he could make
hands and feet for Jagannath.
Sunavesh and...
No, I could kick that in India by the police. I could...
It's interesting. We have to finish up. This will be the last question. We have to finish up now. But a little, addition to that is, it's so challenging. At the ministry, we're always getting new information. Like, I'm glad that Ramanya Prabhu offered this about Govardhan Sheila because it's the first we heard about it. And, like when it comes to Jagannath, you'll find in some things, and Malati Prabhu brought it up, recently to us, is, in one letter or one circumstance, Prabhupada was like saying, no, don't offer, Baladev and Jagannath the plow and mace and all this stuff. He he didn't want it. But I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere else, he either was okay. You know what I mean? So we hear different things. There's a circumstance where Prabhupada once in a letter says you shouldn't offer black outfits to the deities. But then a little bit later in another letter, I never said that. You can do that according to... So, anyway. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari.
Stays out with Maharaj's school, so they're pretty separate.
He's one of the main cooks?
Yeah, he's a cook. He's preparing a book.
You know what? You're getting a new cook. Maybe it was Ken Grass or something from my book to 80,
From his ashram.
Yeah, it was the devotee.
He's writing a book.
I think it's coming. I'll get them.
I think it's in the works.
I think it's. He was in Australia for a little.
Yes, they went to help. He is the head cook in Ireland.
But they want to be head cook.
The deity.
Yeah, we have a 2-week unit. Part of the Mayapur Academy. Mayapur Academy is 4 months every year. And 2 weeks of that is learning to cook for the deity.
So trying to.
Yeah, for 2 weeks. I mean, it's a big teaching.
Oh, I don't know if they asked me to do some business.
He's good. He's good on it.
I know. So how unauthorized shelter?
Well, I hate what the women do. In my quarter, Bobby knows that we've seen one having been that's a big difference between India and
At least later on, like Ryan, we talked about it.
well, Calcutta, but not my quarter.
All right, I'm stealing him. Let's go.
You want breakfast? One thing is Kusha Carter, he was my good buddy. When he was doing the, anyway, he gave me all the books. Right about the loss, right? He searched the loss.